Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Wendy Dillard here. Today is Monday, January 22nd, 2018, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, your second daily dose of happy for the day. And once again, Wendy, the morning show went really well, so we've got our work cut out for us, but somehow we always seem to outdo the morning show. So I don't know, maybe it's not even worth it putting the gauntlet down anymore. We just pick it up and fly with it.
You got it.
But we got a good topic today because we're going to be talking about synchronicities and the question of, are they synchronicities or are they just plain old coincidences that aren't really related to each other? And it's one of those topics, again, that doesn't get a lot of attention, but it should, because that's the kind of thing that can raise questions and concerns in people's minds. Like, is this a real sign? Is this a real thing going on? Or is this just, it just happened because it was coincidence? So, but before we get to that, we have to do our daily routine of wins. Do you have any wins for us from the past weekend?
Well, I do, because Friday I was feeling really yucky. Head cold coming on worse and worse. And, I had finally just let go. And I went, it's here. I'm not going to resist it. Just let it happen. And, the nice thing was I had the weekend where I didn't have anything I had to do. And this morning I woke up and I'm like, okay, do I need to run and blow my nose? Do I need to cough, sneeze, whatever? Because I could be getting on business calls, and I want to prep beforehand. I'm like,
right.
No, I don't need any of that. My head is getting clearer. I felt pretty good. Friday, I knew how bad I felt because I went to do something at work, and my brain could not even calculate the information. It's I couldn't make heads or tails of it. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm done.
Yeah.
And today I went back to the same, quote, problem that I left on Friday, and I went, oh, I know what to do with this one. Of course, this makes sense. I'm like, yay, my brain's back.
You sound good, too. You sound really good.
Thank you. And kind of an addendum to my win is because, if I'm recuperating, I sink into the cuddling experience of being sick. I don't know if that makes any sense. But
yeah, well, it's a time to pamper yourself.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I get to just lay in bed and do nothing? How cool is that? And so, well, I'd like to do that, but there comes a point that, just staring at television is kind of boring.
Oh, yeah.
And so I got my laptop, which is something I don't generally do, but because that's a work kind of thing. But I brought my laptop in bed with me, and I cranked out another story or another chapter for our book.
Fantastic. Oh, wow. My good, there aren't many people who can be sick and crank out a chapter for a book. That's darn good.
So even though I was sneezing and hacking and making all sorts of miserable sounds in between my keystrokes, that's something that you never had to experience. But I got something done. So I felt like my weekend was the ultimate win-win because my body recuperated and did what it knew to do,
right,
as well as me getting a chance to write a chapter, which, again, I finished writing it, and I'm so inspired. It inspired me just to see who I am and what's available to me and how law of attraction always has my back. And
isn't that fantastic?
Another great experience.
Oh, I mean, when we take the time to kind of relive the good stuff that happened, it brings it all back. But more than that, it lifts the mood, it lifts the energy up, it lifts everything up. We just feel better afterward.
Yeah. What about you, Walt? What is your win for the day or the weekend?
Well, we have a win for the hour, actually, because 2 minutes before we came on the air, I got an email telling us that we have our 41st author for the book signed up. And I thought, wow, this is great. Because I was going to announce that we were at 40. Well, we're not. We're at 41.
Hey!
We are 9 away from filling our quota of 50, which there were people who suggested that might be a little bit too much, and I kept saying, no, that's not too much. We can get this done. We're going to get it done.
Oh, I think we're going to blow past 50.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I may have to turn off the spigot at some point.
Or you just start a list for book number 2.
Oh, there will be other stuff later on down the line. And in fact, I'll tell you about something that occurred to me kind of in a semi-daydream state a few days back. I was thinking about this. I was thinking about how it's growing. I was thinking about the submissions that I've been getting. I've been telling people on the show here, including you, just how good some of these submissions are, including the first one that you sent in. I mean, the stories that we're getting are just fantastic. They're really, really good stories. People are going to love reading them. I have no doubt about it. And I'm thinking, this book It may not sell millions and millions of copies, but this book has a good chance to sell a lot of copies. And if it does, then everybody's going to want to get involved in, future projects and so forth. And we've already talked about what some of those projects are going to be. I mean, we're probably going to, for instance, create an email list so that people can get a daily dose of happy in terms of an LOA story every day. And there's probably going to be like one thing I can think of for next year is maybe a 365-day daily dose of happy. So you can have 365 stories, one for every day, just to give you that little boost at the beginning of the day before you turn on the podcast to listen to LOA Today. So those are just two obvious examples, but there's going to be a lot of opportunity for people as this thing grows to share their stories, because the stories keep us going. Stories are what make us, they fire the imagination, they fuel our enthusiasm, they make us think, wow, that's right, this stuff really does work. It isn't just, woo-woo. It's not just this craziness that some left-winger came up with. It's real, it's functional, it's got meat to it. And I can actually use it to make my life better by being a deliberate creator. Well, if we can put that kind of inspiration into people's minds, we're doing a good thing, and I think we will.
Yeah.
So, synchronicities and coincidences. The first question I think absolutely has to be, is there a way to tell between synchronicities and coincidences? Do you have any ideas on that subject?
I've never even thought of that question.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I threw you then. I didn't think that was possible, but
I mean, I think it really has more to do with the belief. And, I don't know that there is a way to prove one or the other, because they're kind of, I don't know. I don't know that you can prove it, but I know, many years ago, I used to use the word coincidence, and a coincidence for me was simply two things that kind of showed up that were similar, and I would just call it a coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
As I started to understand, even before law of attraction, I was understanding just some different, I was learning some different modalities, and one of them taught me that we are the creator of our experience, and that what we focus on, we do get. Yes, it's a law of attraction principle, but I didn't know it under law of attraction. And so at that point, I started to shift my wording, and I saw how I was very much a part of what happened in my life. And so I did start to call it a synchronicity, So
okay.
For me, it was just simply I had a different awareness of my part in creation, and so I just changed the wording.
Okay.
What about you?
I've been through a number of different flip-flops on this question for quite some time, and I'm actually to the point now where I'm not really sure there's any such thing as just a plain coincidence anymore. I think they're probably all synchronicities, and in that sense, all coincidences are synchronicities. But the real root of the issue for me is there such thing as two things that can happen simultaneously that don't have a relationship between them? And I'm not sure that that's possible anymore. There was a time I would have said yes, absolutely. But I don't think so, because just because we can't see what the connection is doesn't mean it isn't there. And given what we know about the law of attraction and the science of deliberate creation and so forth, we know that everything that comes into our life in one way or another is something we attracted. Well, if that's the case, then there's at least one common denominator between the two coincidental or supposedly coincidental things or events. And that commonality is us. We attracted them. Mm-hmm. So at the very least, there is that much that they have in common. And I'd be willing to bet that if there was a way to track all the little threads of attraction and thoughts and events and things we think about and so forth that happen in our lives, if we could actually follow all those threads, I bet you we would find that all coincidences have a common thread besides us. But I can't prove that, because how in the heck do you follow all the threads? There's just no way to do it.
Well, I have a coincidence / synchronicity / law of attraction occurrence that happened for me about a week ago, and it just made me giggle. So I have a master bathroom in my master suite bedroom, and it's really big. And when I'm brushing my teeth, I have this small little window above my tub, and I like to look out the window. And I'm on the second floor, so I can't see a whole lot, but I can see trees that belong to my next door neighbor's house. And so, as the seasons go, I see the trees in green, then I see the leaves fall, then I see them bare, then I see them budding. And I don't know, but for me, it's kind of a fun thing. I like to see how seasons change. In Texas, we get so little of it, but, that's my little moment of going, ooh, look, I can see the seasons have changed. So anyway, I noticed all the leaves had finally come off my neighbor's trees, and that to me is like, okay, winter is really upon us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in Texas, we get really windy in the winter months.
Okay.
And so not any great surprise, I'm seeing the trees kind of bend and lean. And so one day I'm looking out at my window, like I look out at every single day, and I see a bag, one of those plastic bags from the grocery store,
mm-hmm.
Where it has the two handles on it.
Right, yeah.
I see one of these bags, it's like beige or white, stuck in one of my neighbor's trees near one of the top branches. And, the wind is just whipping around and whipping around. And, of course, this is the kind of thing that happens in our neck of the woods on Monday, because Monday is trash day, and they pick up the trash usually about 8 a.m.
Yep.
So I'm like, it's very common for there to be trash, strewn about, especially on windy days. And so I'm just staring at this bag, and I don't know, it was almost like mesmerizing as I was watching the wind whip it around to the left and to the right. And it's like no matter how it was hooked into this tree, it didn't want to fall off. And so this was probably 2 weeks ago, and that tree still has that bag whipping around in the wind.
Oh, my.
So as I'd stare at it, I'd think, how do you get it down? And I'd think of different ways that I can get it down. I had this really long telescoping pole, and I'm like, really, Wendy, you're going to go out into your garage and grab your telescoping thing and go to your neighbor's house and start yanking at his tree? And I'm like, no, that sounds silly. But, this is how invested I was in staring at this stupid bag, because in my mind, it needs to come down. Bags do not belong in trees.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, that makes sense.
Bees do, insects do, and leaves do. But stupid bags from the local grocery store don't belong being connected to a tree.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so this is what I'd focused on quite nicely for, a week to 10 days. Well, all of a sudden, I'm looking out my bedroom window, and I'm looking at my own tree. And I'll be darned if there isn't a black grocery store bag in my tree.
Oh, jeez.
And I'm looking around the neighborhood going, nobody else's trees have bags in them except mine and my neighbor's. And I'm like, oh, how did I get a bag? And then it was like clockwork. I went, well, Wendy, think about how long and how much energy you have put into focusing on the bag on the neighbor's tree. And there was a little bit of a sense of, at least it's not on mine.
Oh, no.
I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that I created this little bag that's floating around my neighborhood to get landed in my tree. Now, here's the fun thing. It's been in my tree for about a week. It used to be so high in the tree that I had to actually lean upward to see it because it was above the roof level.
Okay.
It has moved.
Uh-huh.
It's now down to the first level of my house.
So it's right in your eye level, basically.
And I laughed because I started asking, well, how can I get this thing out? How can I get it off of my tree?
Yeah.
And it has been attempting to leave because it has moved from the upper branches to a lower branch.
Well, has it attempted to leave, or has it attempted to get into your line of sight so you can see it more clearly? Because, like you said, you manifested it. So, it sounds like it's saying, hey, I'm here.
I don't know. But that's the kind of thing that really thrills me, if you will, because it shows me how much, when I give a lot of attention to something, I create it. Now, it wasn't something like a new job or a promotion or a new lover in my life. It wasn't anything on that level.
Mm-hmm.
But, Abraham says that the law of attraction has just as easy of a time creating a button as it does a castle. And so this to me is like a button-sized manifestation. It's inconsequential. It doesn't have a whole lot of value in terms of, is it going to change my life? But I will tell you, it does have a lot of value when it allows me to recognize that my thoughts are powerful.
Oh yeah, and well, let's be honest. It's also giving you an entertainment value too. I mean, now you have a story to tell. I mean,
it does make me laugh every time I look at it.
Oh
every time.
Yeah, so I'd say it's actually a pretty big gift. I mean, in terms of monetary value, it may be pretty small, but in terms of human value, it's got a lot of value because it makes you laugh, it gives you a story to tell, it's fun, it gets your attention. It's like, okay, this little plastic bag is having a different life from most plastic bags.
True. And, many years ago, I totally would have called that a coincidence. Mm-hmm. I would never in a million years have linked the two together, that they had anything to do with one another. I would have just pawned it off saying, look, it happened after trash day. It's always windy in Texas. It's bound to happen. And I would have just logically let it sit there. But I don't believe that anymore because I put a lot of attention on there. Because I wonder if I were to talk to my neighbors, even my next-door neighbor, and if I said, hey, do you know you have a bag in this tree? He'd probably go, I do? Really?
Yeah, right.
I don't see it.
Oh, yeah. And I'll bet you if you took a sort of a census of the street and you checked all the trees, I'll bet you that you don't have a whole lot of bags in all the trees.
Nope. As a matter of fact, I mean, I can see out my window at an awful lot of neighbors' trees, and I'm not seeing any bags hanging out in anyone else's trees but my neighbors and mine.
So now the coincidence starts to become fishy. And that's what happens. As we start to look closer and closer, we start to change our evaluation because I'm with you. I was always very much the coincidence, in the coincidence camp. I just figured it was all like random chance and it didn't really amount to anything. But as you start to see more and more coincidences start to pile up, over time, it does have an effect on you. And when the coincidences start to wrap themselves into absolutely bizarre configurations that even a Hollywood scriptwriter couldn't write, then you start to say, what the heck is going on with the randomizer of the universe? Mm-hmm. Because it just doesn't make sense anymore. That it's just, I mean, this is the randomness. It's creating this crazy, path of unbelievable tortuousness just to produce a result that's desirable for me, and it's all random. That's kind of like asking a monkey to type out Shakespeare if you just leave him at the typewriter long enough. It's a nice theory, but it just doesn't work very well in practice.
That's a good point.
Did you ever notice that the people who say if you leave a monkey in front of a typewriter long enough, he'll eventually type Shakespeare, have never actually tested it? And yet they accuse us of basically engaging in fanciful flights. Like, well, what about yours? Why isn't yours a fanciful flight? Because at least ours come true.
Well, years ago when I was getting ready to buy a new car, and my husband said, well, what kind of car do you want? And I said, a Jaguar. And he said, really? You've never even said the word Jaguar before. Why a Jaguar? And I went, I don't know. It's just what came to mind. Well, anyway, long story short, and I'm not going to go into the whole lengthiness of getting a Jaguar, but I have a Jaguar now. Mm. But what was interesting is while I was looking for one, I didn't even know what they looked like. I mean, truly, I did not know what they looked like.
So you wanted something you'd never seen before. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and so why I wanted it was for a completely separate reason. Actually, one of the things that I later, after the fact, I realized when I got it that, because some Jaguars had different models in terms of, or I should say different styling in terms of what their grill looked like.
Right.
And the one that I bought, I went, oh my gosh, this grill reminds me of the Bentley car that was driven by the main character on a BBC show called To the Manor Born.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I know that one.
And it was something that she drove, and it was something she took great pride in. It's what allowed her to feel like she was still a part of the aristocracy, even though she lost all her money.
Right, yeah.
Well, I don't know what it was about that, except I love that show. I love the feeling of that show. I love the feeling. I love, living through her vicariously of how she maintained a sense of sophistication even though she was broke.
Yes.
It's kind of like her lack of money in her bank account did not change how she felt about who she was.
Right, yeah.
And her Bentley was kind of the last holdout of the things that she owned that could still give her that feeling. And when I looked at the grill on my Jaguar, I went, this looks very much like her Bentley. And I wonder if that's the reason that I wanted this car. And I'm just assuming the universe threw the word Jaguar out to me because I promise you I didn't know what they look like. Well, now, back to synchronicity or coincidence. Here is Wendy not having a clue what they look like. I go and I find one and I buy one. And now all of a sudden, oh my God, they're everywhere.
Oh, of course.
How did I miss Jaguars before? I mean, I thought, like when I passed another one, the night I picked up my car and paid for it, and I'm driving home, I passed a Jaguar in my own town. And I went, wait a minute, where did that come from? And then over the next week, I saw multiple ones in I live in a town of 35,000 people. This is not a big town.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden I was seeing them all over the place. And I know we've all had those kinds of experiences where you buy a car and now you see them everywhere. But I thought it was even more peculiar because I didn't know what they looked like. And now I see them everywhere. And I went, well, so much for feeling like I was the only one who had one, because I think my whole neighborhood does.
Yeah, right. And we've actually talked about this on the show. That's the ARAS. It's a portion of the brain that filters the senses, because if our senses weren't filtered, the overwhelming amount of data that comes through our senses would literally overwhelm us. So we need the filtering. But that filtering is programmable, and it's programmable through thoughts and experiences. So as soon as you start thinking about Jaguars and start focusing on Jaguars, then the filter said, okay, let in everything about Jaguars. Those Jaguars were there all along, I promise you, but because they wasn't filtered for it, because your brain wasn't filtered for it, you weren't seeing them. Now all of a sudden you're seeing them. And
you know what? Up until a while ago, I wasn't focused on bags being caught up in
That's
trees
true.
either.
That's true.
So, you know what, Walt? I wonder if coincidence equals synchronicity equals, however you would describe the ARS part of our brain, just simply shifting our filter system.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's a definite relationship there. In fact, I think it's a relationship that reinforces the theory that synchronicity and coincidence are the same thing. Because a coincidence, as many would define it, would be two events that happen for unrelated reasons. And the reason we say that they're unrelated is we can't see the connection. Well, consider that our ARAS, by the way, for those who are interested in the scientific term, the ARAS is the Ascending Reticular Activating System. So now you've got your science lesson for the day. But the ARAS, if it's always filtering for, or I should say filtering out a particular kind of connection between potential coincidental events, how would you know? I mean, that's its job, is to filter it out. So if it filtered it out and you can't see it, you don't know that your ARAS filtered it out. I mean, a good way to explain that, there's an urban legend. I'm not sure if it's actually true. I like the story, so I like to think that it's true, but I don't really know if it's true. According to this urban legend, back in the day when European explorers first came to the New World, and the very first ones landed on the shoreline, and the local indigenous people came out to greet them. Before they came out to greet them, the ships were on the horizon, and they were floating out on the water. But that was not part of the experience of the indigenous peoples. They had never seen anything like that floating out on the water. So literally they couldn't see them. The only way that they could be seen is if the tribe's shaman would allow them to see it. And what the shaman did, the shaman being the wiser one, was able to learn to manipulate his own ARAS, so he could discover things that other tribes people couldn't discover. And he discovered the ships, and so he basically did some things to help them see the ships that were on the water. But until he did that, they couldn't see the ships. Now, it's an urban legend. Is it actually true? Did it actually happen? I don't know, but it would certainly make sense, especially in light of what we know about the ARAS, because it is very possible to have details right in front of your nose that you can't see simply because your filter isn't set to allow them into your conscious mind. So if the filter doesn't let stuff into the conscious mind, how do you know that the connections aren't there? And you don't.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you don't know what you don't know.
That's right, yeah. And to make matters even more dire, shall we say, for the It's Only a Coincidence crowd, according to this book that Cindy gave me, E Squared by Pam Grout, we each in our five senses collect a grand total of 400 billion bits of data per second. I have no idea how they calculated that, but all I know is it sounds like a lot. And to give you an idea of how much that a lot is, if you had 400 billion zeros and just put them into pages and turn them into books, that would equal about 600,000 books. So according to this calculator, whoever this person is who did this study, our senses take in gigantic amounts of data every second. Now, how much of that data can we process? According to the same source, about 2,000 bits per second. So 400 billion versus 2,000. That means that we are only able to process about 1/2 of 1/1,000,000th of 1% of the data that comes through our senses. The amazing thing isn't that we aren't seeing it. The amazing thing is what we are seeing. Because we're missing almost all of it. And when you look at it that way, you say, how on earth do you continue to justify the it's only a coincidence theory? Because I don't see how you can.
So here's another fun one. I was in junior high, so I was probably 12 years old, and most of the days I took the bus to school because it was a pretty good ways. But there were some days that when the temperature was really lovely, I decided to walk home.
Okay.
And it was a day where it was kind of, winter was coming to an end, but I still had on my winter coat and my lovely mittens and scarf set. And I remember that this mittens and scarf set came from my best friend named Rena. And they were baby blue and white striped, and they matched my baby blue snow jacket that had white trim. And so it was just the cutest thing. I loved how it went together. But it had so much meaning to me that she had given me this mitten and scarf set after she saw my coat.
Yeah.
So I'm walking home from school that day, and I'm starting to get warm. And I, untie my scarf, and it's now just hanging around my neck. And I take my mittens off, and I shove them in my pocket. And so I walk home, and when I got home, I go to take my mittens out and put my scarf, where it belonged in the house. And one of the mittens was gone.
Uh-oh.
And I was devastated because, you don't wear one mitten, And now I didn't have a mitten set that matched. And it was from my friend, and it meant so much to me. And, I was really heartsick over losing this mitten.
Mm.
And so for the next several days, I walked home from school, retracing the exact, path that I had taken, and I looked, and I looked, and I looked, and I couldn't find it.
Mm.
And I was really just heartsick over it. And so, actually, now that I think about it, that was at the beginning of the winter.
Okay.
Because now it's the spring, and by this point, I walk home every now and then, but not very often. And so months go by, and in Chicago, which is where I'm from, usually by March, there is so much buildup of snow up against, the curbs from them being plowed,
right,
that it's like black and gray and really ugly.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And so picture this. It's now probably 6 months later, and I'm walking home, and I promise you it felt like so out of the blue. There is a curb, and there is this yucky, wet, wintry mixture of slush and ice and snow up against this curb, and sticking out of this yucky stuff, there's about 2.5 inches of my blue and white mitten.
Really?
Really. I was like, oh, my God, this can't be. And so I dig around, and I pull it out, and there was my mitten. Now, coincidence?
Well, certainly without your ARS, you wouldn't have even been able to see it, because the average person looking at that snowbank never would have spotted it.
And I honestly wasn't even looking anymore. I had let go of it because I had already made peace with I had lost my mitten months before.
But the filter hadn't forgotten.
And neither had law of attraction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when I think of it from a law of attraction perspective, I know that it was something that I focused on with such intensity. I had so much desire to have that mitten back. And then eventually I let go, which that's letting go of the resistance.
That's true.
And so then when the seasons changed, obviously it got, shoved into a snow mountain somewhere.
Yeah, right.
And then who knows what possessed me, if you will, to walk home that particular day when there was that particular level of snow melting in order for me to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, because chances
and I have
are
to tell you, I kept those mittens, and that's that for probably 30 years.
Did you really? Oh, wow.
Yeah. It had that much meaning to me. But to me, it's like synchronicity? I think not.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot that had to work coincidentally for that coincidence to work, if it was just a coincidence. And
I mean,
how
somebody else could have found it.
Oh, all kinds of stuff could have happened.
So many different things could have happened, but yet I'm the one who found my own mitten.
I mean,
and
if you consider how big...
a 2-mile trek from the school to my house.
Well, plus, if you consider how big these snow piles are, especially in Chicago, I mean, I can kind of imagine how big these piles of snow that the plows put together can be. They're probably many feet high, many feet deep. So even if you conjecture, well, that mitten was going to be somewhere in there, how did it end up at that particular depth of one of those piles of snow? Because there's a lot of snow in those piles. Yeah. I mean, we're talking like tons of snow. If you tried to lift it, you couldn't, because there's so much snow there. It's so heavy. The water is so heavy. And yet the mitten just managed to be in that right position.
And I was walking across the street, and I saw this thing sticking out of the snowbank at curb level. So I literally walked right towards it, and it got my attention.
So it had to be in exactly the perfect spot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, just a coincidence, that's all. Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't even remember how many or how few people I told. I'm sure I told some people, and I could have cared less if anybody called it a coincidence or not. I was just so delighted.
Yeah, you got your mitten back.
My precious mitten.
Absolutely. Yeah, you had the complete set again, which is what you wanted.
I did.
That's great. That's terrific. Synchronicity, I was trying to imagine and remember when I made the complete transition to, okay, there's no such thing as a coincidence. And I don't know that it happened with any particular event, but there is one story, and I think I've actually told it to you, that did happen to me and my wife when we moved up from Virginia to Connecticut with literally no money and no car. And I won't tell the whole story again. People can listen to one of the previous podcasts if they want to hear the whole story. But the very, very short version of the story is we left Virginia thinking we were going to have... We had 2 vehicles in Virginia. One of them had 237,000 miles and it really was not going to last very long, so I wanted to sell it down there. Oh, what the heck, I'll tell the story. Why not? Okay, so we were going to move. It was a move where we had 2 weeks to move. We didn't have hardly any money to do the move. And my wife, who was going to do most of the packing, had to work a full-time job, which was not a lot of fun because she's trying to pack, at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And of course I'm packing too, so we're both doing stuff. Plus I'm also trying to continue to run my business because at that point we were living more on my income than on her income. So anyway, we make the move. And by the way, this is after we went through a long saga trying to get an apartment and a job for her up here, which we finally were able to resolve with a lot of help from the universe. Got down there, 2 weeks to go. We also have 4 cats that we found, who had actually found us, who were homeless, and we could only take 2 of them with us, so that just added to the stress level. And on top of that, we had these 2 old vehicles. One was an old 1998 Camry. That was the one that had 237,000 miles on it, and it wasn't going to last very long. I didn't want to try to drive it north, so I wanted to sell it before we left. And then there was a 2001 Ford Ranger that had high miles, but we figured, well, we can drive that north. That'll give us a car for a bit, and then we'll be good. Except that we couldn't drive it north because we couldn't put the extra stuff, including the cats, in the back of an open pickup truck. That doesn't work real well. So we had to rent a car. We rent an SUV-type van. And that led to another conflict and complication because my wife can't drive 12 hours. So there was no way for me to drive both cars, so we needed to have some way to get the pickup truck up there. So we tried to figure that one out, and at one point I said, okay, I know what to do. I contacted the moving company. I said, listen, we're going to have you do the move for us. We're giving you the contract. I have a question for you, though. Any chance that you could maybe attach our pickup truck to the back of the van and tow it up? And they said, yeah, we could do that. I said, great, that takes care of that problem. Now we have a way to get the truck up there. Okay, day before the move, I get a buyer for my car. The buyer comes by, and the car, I think I was asking like $700. I was hoping to get $500 out of it. It's a pretty old car. Buyer comes up, takes a look at the car, and says, did you know this car doesn't have any oil in it? Now, I had just driven it a half an hour before.
Okay.
And I looked at the tank, and sure enough, it was completely out of oil. How did that manage to drive without damaging it? I don't know. It wasn't, blowing out a whole bunch of smoke or anything, but it had. I guess it is possible if you don't run it too long, there's a certain layer of oil in there so that it'll prevent it from completely overheating. But it didn't look good for trying to sell the car. And the guy says, well, I'll tell you what. I know you asked $700. I'll give you $500 for it. And I said, okay. Great, love it. And so he towed the car away. I was left with $500 in my pocket. Next day's move day, and the moving van shows up, and they start loading up the van. And in the midst of the move, the owner of the company gets my wife's attention, who gets my attention, to tell me that according to the law, they can't actually tow our pickup truck behind the moving van. Oh no! Now what are we going to do?
Oh my gosh, this is like the last thing you need on your mind.
Oh, yeah.
Before you're moving. Holy cow.
We've got to move. What do we do with the truck? I was hoping to get up here and get maybe $1,000 out of it and, trade in on something else or something like that. And now we have no way to do it. So we're sitting there trying to figure it out, and one of his employees comes up to him and says, are you interested in selling that truck? And I said, sure. What would you like to offer for it? Well, I'll give you $1,500.
Total amazement.
Well, the owner of the truck of the moving company actually ended up putting up the money because the guy didn't have $1,500 in cash with him. So we worked a deal where the owner talked us down to $1,200, which I was glad to go for, and we would do it as a swap. So instead of him giving me cash, he would lower the cost of the move by $1,200. I said, great. That means I don't have to bring as much cash with me. I love this. So, okay, we got both of the cars taken care of. So they pack us up, and they packed that truck to the gills. You could not have gotten a teaspoon in it. It was that tight. We actually had to leave a couple things behind. There just wasn't enough room, not even in the extra van that we had that was also packed to the rafters. We had to stay after they left because we had to, clean the house and clean the kitchen and all that kind of stuff for the next tenant coming in. And by the time we were ready to leave, it was about 11 o'clock at night, and we had an 8-hour drive to Connecticut from where we were. And so this was actually, I think it was 8 o'clock at night, not 11 o'clock at night. Yeah, that would make more sense. So 8 o'clock at night, and we're exhausted. We're stressed out beyond belief. We get the cats in the car into their carriers, and we start driving, and my wife says, oh my God. I said, what? She says, we don't own a car. And I realized she was right. We don't own a car. Not only that, we're driving north with the last bit of our money that we're going to pay the mover with, so we don't have any money for a car. We don't have any money for a down payment. My wife's just starting her job. It's not a real high-paying job. We can barely afford anything, and we need 2 cars. What the heck are we going to do? So we arrived at our new home at about 4 o'clock in the morning. There's no furniture, of course, but we had a little air mattress. So we set up the air mattress and lay down to get some sleep. 45 minutes later, we get a phone call. The moving van's outside. Can they come in and start moving everything in? So on 45 minutes sleep, we let them in. They unload everything. They take off. Okay, next day, we need a car. What are we going to do? Well, let's go to a car dealer. I don't know what to do. I mean, I was trying to do the math, and I couldn't come up with any way, even with like an older used car, 2 older used cars to give us 2 cars. I couldn't think of a way to make the payments work. And so I'm saying, I don't know how to do this. And we basically just said, well, we'll just have to trust the universe because we have no idea how to make this happen. So we went to a car dealer, and the first one we went to, they wanted, we were a Toyota family, so we went to a Toyota dealership, and they wanted to put us into a Camry, and they said, would you consider a lease? Because leases are less expensive. I said, well, we'd consider it, but we've got to figure out a way to make sure we can have 2 cars. We can't just do one. And so they tried to put us into a lease, and then we ended up getting worn down by them to the point where we put like a deposit down, but we weren't real happy with it, and the lease was more than we could really afford. And so we went away not feeling real happy. Well, next morning we woke up and we said, this isn't going to work. We just can't do that. So I'm going to take the van up there and just return the deposit and say, look, that deal doesn't work. We're going to figure something else out. And I actually ended up doing that a couple days later. So what do we do now? Well, we went to another dealership. This one was actually nearby, very close to where we live, also a Toyota dealership. We walk in the door, and we basically explain the same story to them, that we have no money, we have no down payment, we really can't afford much of anything, but we need 2 cars. Do they have any really old used cars that maybe we can work a deal on? Well, no, they didn't. The oldest used car they keep is 2 years old, and it was just way out of our price range. So, okay, well, I'm not sure what we're going to do. We're talking to a really nice guy. His name is Jose. He's their most successful salesperson. And while we're talking to him, his sales manager, also named Jose, comes over and listens to the story and says, tell you what, let's see if we can figure something out here. Let me crunch some numbers. So I said, okay, yeah, give it a shot. At this point, I don't really care because I don't know what to do. So he starts crunching numbers, and he comes back with a price, and it's certainly a lot better than what the other Toyota dealer offered. But I mean, I just knew I couldn't do it. I mean, it was a nice thing to try, but it just wasn't going to work. So he said, no, go on, let me try this again. We went through that a few times. They ended up coming back to me with, okay, here's what we're going to do. We will give you the lease price on that car at our cost. We won't make any money on it at all. And I said, why would you want to do that?
Really?
And they said, well, sales have been kind of slow. We need to get some sales on the books, and we're just hoping you'll become a long-term customer. I said, well, that sounds pretty good, but we still have my wife. Well, we've got this other used Corolla over here. So we look at the used Corolla, and she hates it. My wife just hates it. She absolutely despises it. I mean, it's not a bad car, don't get me wrong, but it's got a black interior. My wife has a gardening business. The last thing she needs is to be driving a car around in the dead of summer with a black interior and all these plants inside. I mean, it'd be like driving inside of a greenhouse. She doesn't need that, So by this time, it's like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and she's got a stress headache. I've got a headache. They're trying so desperately to figure out some way to get us into 2 cars. And she says, look, I'm just going to go home. I'll take the van. Why don't you sign up? You can take the lease on the Camry. That's a good price. We can't turn that down. And I'll just go home, and I just need to get a nap. I just needed to put my head down. So I said, okay. So she leaves. About 5 minutes after she leaves, Jose, the assistant manager, comes over and says, where's Louise? And I said, oh, she's got a headache. She just can't do this anymore. He says, well, get her back. And I said, why? He says, because I'm going to give you a brand new Corolla at the same price that I was going to give her the old Corolla.
My God.
I said, what? How do you do that? Well, we're going to do it again. We're going to do it at cost. We're not going to make any money on any of this, but you're going to have 2 new cars. So I called Louise. I said, Louise, you got to come back. They're going to give us a brand new Corolla for you. What? Long story short, we drove off the lot with 2 brand new cars. We had no money. We had no means to get cars, and we had 2 brand new cars. For the first times in our lives, we had new cars.
That is so cool.
Now, how many different twists and turns are there in that story? There's got to be at least...
The first one that I noticed that stuck out to me as like, someone might consider it a coincidence, is when you couldn't take your pickup truck and the moving guy said, hey, would you want to sell that?
Well, there's also the car before that where the car ran out of oil and the guy bought it anyway for my price.
True.
I mean, that was pretty weird. So there's 2 of them right there. And then the guy shows up with a moving van just as we're getting some sleep. That wasn't a really nice coincidence, but there he showed up. And then we go to look for the car dealership. The first car dealership doesn't work, but the second one, they give us 2 brand new cars that we can't really afford and that they can't afford to give us, but they give them to us anyway because they need to make sales. I mean, what are the odds? And can you?
They can be calculated.
Can you imagine anyone in Hollywood writing a script like that? They'd be fired. Like, no one would believe that story.
Wow. You know, I know you've told that story before, and I have to tell you, it is such a magnificent story. And I shared it with a friend of mine who's going through, you know, trying to find a car, and, well, this is all she's finding, and it may not be what she wants. And I'm like, everything's negotiable.
It is.
Everything's negotiable. I mean, Walt and Louise, they walked off the lot with exactly what they wanted for, like, exactly what they had, which was so beyond what they started out with.
Actually, it was more. I was hoping for really, like, 8-year-old cars. I got brand new cars. I got more than I wanted.
Wow. The universe could gift us so much more than sometimes we're ever even willing to consider.
Yeah.
And the only thing that keeps us from getting it all is our resistance to thinking it's possible.
And that's the thing. Our resistance was gone because we didn't know what to do. We were literally just flabbergasted, like, I don't know how to fix this.
Yeah. You're like, I don't know. I mean, you'd even given up at that point on 2 cars.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we were trying to figure out, well, maybe we can do it with 1 car. How can we get by with 1, you know? And the universe said, nope, you're going to have 2 cars. Here they are. Sign here.
You know, I mean, I believe that our life is supposed to be synchronistic. And, you know, not everybody's life is. At least it doesn't appear that way. But I do know that when you think about how to align with the laws of the universe, life becomes easy. And this level of synchronicity that you just talked about in this story with your cars becomes a way of life.
Well, here's a question for you. You posited the idea that not everybody's life is synchronistic. I'm going to posit the idea that everyone's life is synchronistic. And I'm going to pose a little challenge for you. If you imagine somebody whose life isn't synchronistic, I'm willing to bet that their life is not going the way they want it to. I'm willing to bet that there are a lot of things that are going wrong. I'm willing to bet that they aren't, if they are LOA practitioners, they're not feeling successful, and most likely they don't know anything about LOA at all. And I'm willing to bet that they consider their lives to not be synchronistic because they never experienced them. Okay. So there's the scenario. Now, we already talked earlier about how the overwhelming majority of data that our senses get is not processed by our conscious mind because there's just too much of it. The filter filters most of it out. So here's the question. Can we really trust that person's judgment that they've had no synchronicities in their life because they're missing 99.9% of the data coming in?
Well, when I made the statement, people don't live in not everybody lives in synchronicity, I would definitely say that that's their perception, that they're not living with synchronicity.
I think that's it.
What you just said, I totally agree with, because I believe that there are so many opportunities that are put in front of us on a regular basis, but many of us miss a lot of them.
Yes.
Because we're not focused on what we want.
In fact, here's something that's really kind of interesting. What if synchronicities are happening every moment of the day and we don't see them?
I believe that's absolutely the case.
I think so, too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it certainly makes me want to wake up more. I want to open my eyes. I want to see more of them. So, yeah.
I mean, that's where I would put out this kind of phrase to the universe. It's like, I want to be open to more synchronicities. I want to connect with and align with all these things that are available to me that I really desire. So whatever has to move out of the way so that my eyes can see them, I want to see. And
like you said earlier, I also want to remove all those resistances I have in the way. And I need help getting rid of them all because I'm sure the resistances are there by my placing them there. I just don't know how I did it.
But here's the good news, Walt, about resistance. If you focus on resistance, you're going to get more resistance.
True.
But if you focus on what you desire, then whatever resistance has been prohibiting you from receiving what you desire will make its way known to you so you can clear it.
So that's really the thing to ask for then. I want to know what they are.
Well, so you don't have to focus on resistance at all. Focus on what you want. The natural process of the laws that we're talking about will bring those resistant points to the surface
Okay.
so that you can clear them.
So then what I really want is I want the manifestations that I'm looking for to start happening so that the resistances kind of just clear out of the way, which is actually the easiest form.
All you have to do is focus on what you want. The creation doesn't even have to manifest yet. Just focus on what you want. That's the deal for the day. Focus on what you want, and everything else shows up. If the resistance is in the way, it'll show up. You clear it, you move on. But you stay focused on what you want.
Now, when resistances show up for you, I imagine that it's not as difficult as it was early on when you were first learning this stuff. I imagine you can clear them pretty quickly. So do you have, like, tricks that you use? Do you have any kind of approach you use?
This is going to sound really like, duh. I stay focused on what I want.
So talk about that, because that's easy to lose focus, isn't it?
Yeah, because when the resistance comes up, of course there's frustration, there's disappointment, there's anger, there's, oh, it never happens for me. There's all sorts of stupid residual thinking that goes on with those. And as I'm doing that, I'm losing focus on what I want. And I'm now focusing on what I don't want.
And we do that all the time.
So what's the tip or trick? I've started to learn to catch it much quicker.
Uh-huh.
And because I've been practicing it for a long time, I do catch it quicker. Sometimes I catch it within seconds, and sometimes I catch it in days. But I no longer catch it in weeks, months, or years.
And that's really what it's about, isn't it? It's about progress. It's not about the perfection. It's about just getting it more often and getting it as quickly as you can and then trying to improve over time.
Exactly. And so the moment, I hit a wall of resistance, actually, I heard this on Abraham the other day, and I thought this was good. The absolute best, and this, you'll like this one, the absolute best practice that you can have, the moment you have awareness that you just ran into a wall of resistance, is to laugh.
Well, yeah, I like that one a lot because that matches my own.
The moment you go, like I did it on the show the other day that you had such a good giggle over, where I was going down, some stupid path, and I went, Wendy, you don't even believe that.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that.
And I started laughing. Well, very well I couldn't continue that train of thought.
Yeah, right.
I had just made it obsolete and silliness in my own mind. So I did practice. I laughed. I just completely laughed at myself. So that to me is like the best go-to practice you can do is if you catch yourself in resistance, even if it feels weird, just go, what am I doing focusing on what I don't want? I know that's not the way to manifest my desire. Silly me.
Yeah, right. And you're right. Laughter is a wonderful way to just take all the sting out of stuff. Because if you're laughing at it, you can't feel sting and laugh at the same time, at least not for very long. You might be able to do it for like a split second, but it goes away pretty quick.
And so, in NLP terms, it's called breaking your pattern. Because if you're in a place where you're feeling angst or stuck or frustrated, and then you laugh, it's like you're shaking yourself out of the state of being you were just in. And now whenever you've broken your state, it's a whole lot easier to reframe or readjust or pivot in a new direction, But it's not so easy to do that if you're still in a place of, putting your heels in the ground and just trying to stick with something or, fight against something hard. It's very difficult to turn in the direction of your desire when you're feeling that.
And that's why I think there's a great deal of value in, well, first of all, listening to the podcast, because it's one way to get happier. But just in general, focusing on all the things that makes us happier. It doesn't really matter whether or not we're trying to manifest anything. Just as a general policy, going through the day, looking for ways to be like a Wendy Pollyanna, because Wendy's the champion of Pollyanna, so that's why we call it a Wendy Pollyanna. But it really is true. It's a good idea to just do that, because when those opportunities to face up to those resistances appear, it's a whole lot easier to let go of them when you're feeling happy.
Absolutely. And the more you practice letting go of that stuff, the easier it is to let go of that stuff when it pops up.
Isn't that funny how that works? I mean, it's kind of like one of those obvious things. But when you're not in that really good feeling state, when you're in a tough state, it really is hard to make a change. It really is hard to shift. It really is hard to just let something go. But when you're feeling much better, it's like, oh, okay, no problem. It just goes.
Well, Friday late in the day, when I just could not put two thoughts together and have them make sense because the head cold had really just gotten the better of me.
Right.
I just let go and went, oh, well, now is not the time to try to figure this out. And, I reminded myself that I won't feel this way forever.
Nope.
I've had head colds before, and they always move through a cycle of symptomology until, you feel better. And, I've always kind of had this thing in my head, I don't know if you've ever heard this, that if you go to a doctor when you have a cold and you get antibiotics, you'll get better within about 7 to 10 days. Mm-hmm. If you don't go to the doctor and you stay at home and you do absolutely nothing except let your cold be the cold, you'll get better in about 7 to 10 days. Because your body has a natural healing cycle. Well, whether those exact days are accurate or not doesn't matter for the purpose of my story. But I have such a strong belief that my body knows what to do and it's going to take care of me. I remember saying to myself the other day, well, I'm 2 days into this head cold, and if I believe 7 to 10 days, well, shoot, it'll be over by next week. That's not the end of the world.
That's true.
And, just reminding myself that all colds go through cycles and then they're done, it was kind of a freeing moment for me.
Sure.
Because the moment I was feeling frustrated that I couldn't put thoughts together and have them make sense, I'm like, my brain will come back. It's not like it's gone.
That's right.
It's just there's a temporary sign that says, do not use. We're processing something else.
Men at work. Something new going in here.
And, it was really very shocking to me that when I decided to pull my laptop, in from another room and play with it while I was laying in bed, I certainly didn't expect to crank out a chapter because I thought I couldn't put two thoughts together. And yet I put many thoughts together. Mm-hmm. And I went, okay, well, I think I just was done with my job. I was finished for the week. I was ready to move on.
And plus, I'm sure you've done this too, because there have been times where I felt something coming on like that, and I just decided I wasn't going to be sick. I just wasn't going to be. I mean, I could feel all the symptoms. I could feel, the throat thickening up and all that stuff. But for whatever reason, I just decided I wasn't going to be sick. I was going to be well. And in fact, I decided I was well. And then I would decide that not only am I well, but I'm going to feel well. And in fact, I am feeling well. And I would just get going like that. And I don't know what the success ratio is, but it was pretty high. I'm going to guess maybe like 4 out of 5 times I wouldn't get sick. Just because I decided I wasn't going to. Because I decided I wasn't going to buy into all that stuff, all that symptomology and so forth. I just wasn't going to go there. I got too many important things to do. I don't need that. So I prefer to be well right now. And
totally agree. And I know that is very real.
Yeah.
Because what you just described is something that I have done many, many times.
I'm sure you have. Yeah.
And like I had talked about it the other day, I feel pretty certain. Coincidence, synchronicity, ha, 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 because they're the same thing. Mm-hmm. I had spent so much time, just like this looking at stupid bag on my neighbor's tree. Every time I'd go out to get my mail and I put on my wool coat and I didn't have on gloves and mittens and I didn't have on anything on my legs, I was tapping into thinking about what many people would say to me if they saw me. See, I purposely did it at night so other people wouldn't see me. But if they saw me, they'd say, "Oh, girl, you should put pants on, or you should have, warmer warmer clothes on," because I know that people have a belief that you get sick if you go outside in the cold and you're not properly dressed.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I don't believe that, but I had put a lot of focus on what other people believe about getting sick. And I spent many days thinking about that.
Yeah.
So I think that's the difference between how it was that normally a cold symptom comes on and boom, I kill it off with my thoughts. And this time I didn't.
Yeah, I think you're right. I do know one other thing.
There was just a lot of momentum on getting sick.
I do know one other thing, and this is not a synchronicity or coincidence at all. Once again, we've run out of time.
The show's over.
Wendy, I don't even have time to even tell people where to subscribe, so I'll just say it's been a pleasure. Let's do it again tomorrow.
You got it. Talk to you tomorrow.
Okay, we'll see you all tomorrow here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye now.